So, like, is horror getting worse? Let me explain. I'm a huge horror fan. I still go to the movie theater to see every single horror movie and Zootopia 2. I have played nearly every single popular horror game under the sun, and my bookshelf is filled with the most twisted works of literature and the Heartstopper series. But is it just me, or is the horror industry completely getting filled with remakes, sequels, and unnecessary franchises? Horror has become one of the most predictable and less scary genres I have ever witnessed. I see this complaint a lot online, and I have to agree. There just isn't too much that scares me anymore, so I'd like to discuss some things with you. Horror itself isn't getting worse. The industry has become safer, more formulaic, and more product driven, and we as viewers are older and harder to scare. Okay, so let's be real. Modern horror is built around IPs. They're designed for franchises and box office returns. They're market tested rather than creatively risky. Studios are no longer asking themselves what is scary, they're asking themselves what works. What do people respond well to, and what do the critics like? Look at older horror. It was risky and absolutely insane. Stuff happened in it just for the sake of being scary. There was literally no point to like 90% of the Nightmare on Elm Street other than to scare people. We don't really get that much anymore. Everything has to be safe. I understand that like movies are products and they need to sell, and taking risk has the potential not to sell, but come on. Horror fans want new, they want shocking, they want scary. I think I speak for all of us when I say that we are sick of seeing the same stuff over and over again. No franchise shows this better than the Conjuring universe. Oh, The Conjuring, how I once loved you. Well, I still love you, but like, less. Let's talk about the first film in the series. It was 2013, simpler times, and then BAM! One of the best horror movies in a long time graced the world with his presence. Back then, the whole based on a true story thing was still like fun and engaging, and even though like 90% of it was bullshit, it was still pretty cool. Have you seen pictures of the real Warrens? They couldn't at least cast people to look kind of like them. I mean, it probably is for the best, but like, they look nothing alike. It's a little bit, like, insulting to the Warrens, but, like, I don't know, actors kind of gotta look a little bit better than their real-life counterparts. Anyway, the first film felt amazing. It had a somewhat simple story with a pretty cool twist. It was also, like, more focused. It wasn't worried about Ed and Lorraine's love story, which has become a very prominent beeline in every single recent film. It focused on what we came for, the scares and the cool demon stuff. It had an unbelievably strong atmosphere from the start. Like, that whole setup with Annabelle playing into the fear of dolls that so many viewers had, I have to say, it was pretty great. The pacing of the film was also pretty good. I've heard many say that it's slow and takes a while for stuff to, like, get really scary, but I kind of gotta disagree with that. The pacing shows a lot of restraint, and that's the problem with a lot of new horror. It comes out of the gate swinging with absolutely no suspense. Another, like, thing I really liked about the first Conjuring movie was that the characters felt like real people. Like, they felt grounded in reality and just not people who are there to scream at scary stuff and, like, CGI Annabelle. And Ed and Lorraine also felt more like professional demonologists or whatever the hell they called themselves instead of comic relief. Like, at one point in the series did they decide that Ed needed to be like a goofy little dude who sings like Elvis covers and keeps his heart medication in his necklace like a cutie? Like, who decided that? It doesn't make any sense. And don't get me wrong, horror and comedy can be an amazing combo. If you're wondering what that like looks like perfectly executed, just read anything by Jason Pargin. Like, it's all flawless. But I feel like this type of film is not the place for this whole like lock it heart medication or awkward marriage conversations about like, oh, I love you so much so you can't die. Like, that just feels really out of place for a movie about ghost hunters, pretty much. Like, R-rated Ghostbusters. And another thing about the original film, it really focused on the power of silence and shadows and the what you don't see. And I think a lot of classic horror did that well because they didn't have the technology we had today. They had to make creative workarounds for technological limitations. And now that you can pretty much make anything with CGI, we just do. And I think that takes a lot of the like mystery aspect out of it. I blame Avatar, by the way, for this. I don't think anyone really believed in CGI until Avatar, and then they ruined it for everybody, and now we all are stuck with CGI. Now we need to talk about the most recent Conjuring movie. It was literally just fan service. I mean, how many more times am I gonna see Annabelle in a movie before I die? She is literally everywhere. Like, yeah, she was scary the first time. And her movie that she, like, had by herself leaves a lot to be desired. Like, I did not like it. She just kind of lost all of her creep factor after her being shoved down my throat for the past 10 years. And, I mean, the most recent film had a lot going on. Like, it had a lot going for it. Like, a lot. It had too much going on. It was just a familiar scene after a familiar scene. I think the movie had some pretty cool ideas packed in there somewhere. Like, that part where that chick, like, eats a piece of glass and then she pukes up blood everywhere, that was really cool. Like, I loved that. Oh, that sounded weird. Anyway, that could have been amazing, and the fear could have really seeped in, but they moved on to the next thing, like, way too quickly. They rushed her off to the hospital, and that was the last time you ever heard about that. Are you kidding me? If blood came out of my mouth with the force of Old Faithful, I would never forget that, and I would never let anybody else forget it. I'd also never eat anything from, like, a glass container ever again, but I'm pretty sure she was eaten from glass, like, right after that. Like, okay, girl. I really think that that's, like, a huge issue with the new film. The characters don't react and reflect. Reflection is a big part of horror. That's how tensions, like, built and characterization improves and the stakes are established. The film really lacked a lot of reflection from the characters. Horror stories are still stories. There has to be, like, a plot, content, and an engaging narrative. To sum up that entire rant about how disappointed I was in that film, I need to say that it just lacked charm and originality. And I think many modern horror films are doing that. This shift, I think, ties directly on how effects are used to this day. We really need to address, like, the biggest issue in horror right now. It's not the dull writing and it's not the use of AI. It is the CGI. Like, don't get me wrong, it can be used to make amazing effects. But has anyone noticed that, like, CGI keeps getting worse? Have you watched Jurassic Park, like, recently? It's not perfect CGI, but it really holds up so well after all these years. That T-Rex in the rain, amazing. And I just found out that the car is CGI in the scene where the T-Rex is, like, eating it and stuff. That blew my mind. I'm getting off topic. My point here is that practical effects are where it's at, baby! Let's take a look at one of the best classic horror movies, The Nightmare on Elm Street. And no, it's not one of the best because young Johnny Depp is in it. It's amazing because it is scary. The idea is original, the stalker is well designed, and the practical effects make it feel real. Practical effects matter because they give the threat presence. Take a look at the original Conjuring if you want to go back to that. The monster thingy on top of the wardrobe, I have seen people call that the best jump scare of all time. The reason? It's not just the buildup, but the presence of the monster in that scene. Despite its flaws, Smile 2 has amazing practical effects at the end that gives this horrifying vibe in a well-lit building surrounded by people. It made everything feel real. It made the stakes feel powerful. That little monster throat looking man was crazy looking, and it really made me scared of what was going to happen to the lady who played Jasmine in the live action Aladdin. Another aspect of practical effects that I would like to note is that they are not perfect. That is the point! Horror and perfection do not go hand in hand. The imperfections are what make things scary. Look at the Uncanny Valley or analog horror. Those are imperfections that are used to make us question our reality. Like, CGI is great, but it's way too clean and polished. It takes away all the bumps in reality that make monsters and environments unsettling. Take a look at that scene from the most recent Conjuring movie where that big old Annabelle was running through the hall. Like, it is not as scary compared to the doll itself. It's like night and day. I mean, yeah, it's kind of freaky that she's so big, but it just is way too polished and, like, fake looking. I fear that horror has become more about a spectacle than about fear. It's more like, hey, look how big and scary this CGI blob is on the screen, rather than showing the audience true suspense, fear, and tangible threats. I also think that the actor being able to interact with the monster on screen is very important. Letting the actor share the space with the horror does not go unnoticed by the audience. It's a huge way to build tension. Imagine if Ghostface were CGI. His presence in the film and his lifelike interactions with the characters would completely dissipate. Now, just let me be clear, CGI can interact with the actors well. I mean, we can look at Avatar for that. But here's the catch. Horror movies do not have that budget. I can go on and on about how horror is an underrated genre that deserves more recognition, but budgets for these films is not as high as Avatar or Marvel movies. That's just a fact. Horror lovers value creativity, suspense, and atmosphere over polished CGI. I just wish, the people making the movies knew that as well. Unfortunately, we live in a world where making movies is expensive and hard, and practical effects are not always, practical. However, in the modern era of CGI, a film stands out that used practical effects that perfectly captured the horror it was going for. I am sure that many of you have seen The Substance. This film used so many practical effects that transformed the body horror in the film. It makes it so much more real and so much more scary than anything CGI could ever do. It was visually disturbing in a very real and grounding way. That's the thing with practical effects. They feel real because they are real. They can't defy the laws of reality, and that's what makes them so useful in horror. Horror isn't about really defying reality. It's about tapping into the darkest corners of the human mind, but it still has to be somewhat realistic. People like that type of reclaim in their fantasy. Don't believe me? Take a look at the entirety of the science fiction genre. That whole genre is based around fake science that is still explained and grounded in reality, even if the rules of reality are made up in that universe. Fiction needs grounding and it needs rules to be relatable. Let's go back to The Substance for a second. That film won awards. Clearly, audience responded well to the practical effects over the other CGI-ridden movies that came out that year. It was also risky. It had a heavy concept that has never really been done before. It's not a traditional alter ego movie. It shows us the horrific sides of the entertainment industry and the terrible ways celebrities are treated as disposable. It's brilliant and terrifying at the same time. I have a list of movies that I often say ruined my life because of the effects. The Substance is on that list. To make that list, a movie has to be so scary that I fear that whatever was featured in that movie lives in my basement when I'm trying to do laundry. And just a side note, I played Resident Evil 7 in VR when I was in high school, and I am still scared to this day that those mold monster dudes are hiding in my basement. Aside from the practical effects, there is one huge factor that plays into the decline of horror. It's us. We're the problem. We're getting older. If you're a horror fan, you've probably been watching horror movies for many, many years. You've seen plenty of movies, been to haunted houses, and have a pretty deep obsession with Halloween. Here's a fun allegory. A ton of haunted houses that appear around Halloween often have multiple haunted houses to go in one. It's usually called something slightly cringy like the 13 Floors of Fear, or the 10 Houses of Horror, or boo! 20 haunted houses ahead. As someone who goes to multiple of these every single spooky season, I can tell you that they get old. Around haunted house number 4, you start to get a little bit numb to it. You can only get jump scared by an underpaid teenager so many times before you just want to look at the cool decorations and move on. And honestly, the scariest part of the haunted houses for me is that when the monsters took off my mask, it was one of my students that I teach, and it was really awkward, so I didn't really appreciate that. But they should put that as a selling point. You may see one of your students here if you teach high school. Anyway, the same goes for horror movies. We are constantly watching the big new horror movie. We're not numb because all of them are inherently bad. We're numb because we've seen it all at this point. Don't get me wrong, some horror movies are so bad that I wonder how they went through multiple people to get made. But many of these movies are technically good, just not scary to us. Horror relies heavily on surprise and unfamiliar ideas. Unfortunately for The Conjuring, ghosts are not unfamiliar in a genre that is mostly about ghosts. When everything is familiar, fear can feel kinda dull. This is a huge reflection on the film industry. What I think the horror genre needs is a movie that shocks everyone with a brand new idea and way to scare. Honestly, a movie like that will probably fail at first. That's what we need, though. Edgar Allan Poe was not recognized as a creative genius until he was many years dead. If any movie makers are listening, please go crazy with your next idea. Make it horribly creative. We need this. To sum up everything I've said and put it simply, horror is not creatively dead. It's just overrun with painfully average content. The big problem I see are fewer risks, too much polish, and too many similarities. I believe that horror can still shock us just like The Substance did. Studios just need to stop mass producing fear and start trusting bold ideas again. Horror didn't get worse. We just stopped letting it be dangerous.